The transport ship Celestial Dawn hummed through the void between star systems, carrying its precious cargo of diplomats, scientists, and military personnel toward the neutral meeting station known as Harmony Point. Among the passengers sat Staff Sergeant Marcus Tank Rodriguez, a weathered U.S. Marine whose massive frame seemed almost comically oversized for the alien design seating. His dark eyes scanned the diverse collection of beings sharing the passenger compartment, taking mental notes of potential threats and allies with the practiced ease of a man who had survived 3 tours in Earth's most dangerous conflict zones. The ship represented humanity's first major diplomatic venture into the greater galactic community. After decades of isolation following first contact, Earth had finally been invited to join the Galactic Council, a governing body that maintained peace among hundreds of species across dozens of star systems. Rodriguez was part of a small security detail assigned to protect the human delegation, though the mission was supposed to be entirely peaceful. The Galactic Council prided itself on civilized discourse and had strict prohibitions against violence within their territories. Across the aisle, a group of Zephyrian warriors lounged in their specially reinforced seats. These beings stood nearly 8 feet tall when upright, their bodies covered in natural armor plating that resembled polished obsidian. Their species had dominated the galactic military scene for over 2 centuries, serving as both peacekeepers and enforcers for the Council. Their leader, a scarred veteran named Korthak the Render, wore the ceremonial blood-red markings that indicated his status as a battle-proven killer. He had personally ended the lives of over 300 sentient beings in sanctioned combat, each death adding to his reputation and authority. Korthak's amber eyes fixed on the human marine with undisguised contempt. The Zephyrians had been briefing materials about Earth's military capabilities, and they were decidedly unimpressed. Humans were small, soft, and short-lived compared to most galactic species. Their weapons were primitive, their tactics crude, and their physical capabilities laughably limited. The fact that Earth considered this particular specimen a warrior was almost insulting to Korthak's professional sensibilities. The human delegation occupied a cluster of seats near the center of the compartment. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the chief diplomat, reviewed her notes on galactic protocol while trying not to look nervous. She had spent years preparing for this moment, learning dozens of alien languages and customs, but nothing could truly prepare someone for the reality of interstellar politics. Beside her sat Dr. James Morrison, a xenoanthropologist whose excitement was barely contained as he observed the various alien species around them. The third member of their group, Admiral Sarah Chun, represented Earth's military interests. She had handpicked Rodriguez for this mission specifically because of his reputation for remaining calm under pressure. The man had earned his nickname Tank not just for his imposing physical presence, but for his ability to absorb enormous amounts of stress and punishment without breaking. Chun had reviewed his service record extensively: 3 Purple Hearts, 2 Bronze Stars, and a Medal of Honor earned during the brutal urban warfare of the Kashmir conflict. If trouble arose, she wanted Rodriguez by her side. As the ship continued its journey, the various species aboard began to interact in the common areas. The galactic community operated on a complex social hierarchy based largely on military prowess and technological advancement. Humans, being newcomers with relatively primitive capabilities, found themselves at the bottom of this pecking order. Most aliens simply ignored them, but a few made their disdain obvious through subtle gestures and cutting remarks. Rodriguez noticed the power dynamics immediately. He had seen similar behavior in joint military operations with allied forces: the subtle jockeying for position, the testing of boundaries, the establishment of dominance. What concerned him was how some of the alien species seemed to view humans as potential prey rather than equals. The Zephyrians in particular radiated a predatory confidence that suggested they considered humans little more than amusing pets. The breaking point came during the 3rd day of travel. The ship's common area had been converted for a diplomatic reception, allowing the various species to mingle and engage in preliminary negotiations. Dr. Vasquez was deep in conversation with a delegation of crystalline beings when Korthak approached the human group. His massive frame towered over the seated humans, casting a shadow across their table. "So these are the famous Earth warriors," Korthak rumbled, his voice carrying the grinding quality of stone against metal. The universal translator rendered his words in perfect English, though it couldn't quite capture the underlying menace in his tone. "I have read your military reports with great interest. Your species has an amusing tendency towards self-destruction." Admiral Chun stood slowly, her diplomatic training kicking in despite the obvious provocation. "We prefer to think of it as a talent for overcoming adversity," she replied calmly. "Humans have always found ways to adapt and survive, regardless of the circumstances." Korthak's mandibles clicked in what Rodriguez recognized as the Zephyrian equivalent of laughter. Survival through weakness and cunning, perhaps. "But tell me, Admiral, what would happen if your soft little warriors faced true galactic combat? How long would they last against a real opponent?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Rodriguez felt the familiar tightness in his chest that always preceded combat, the body's automatic preparation for violence. He had learned to recognize and control this response over years of training, but something about Korthak's casual arrogance triggered deeper instincts. This wasn't just diplomatic posturing. It was a predator testing potential prey. Dr. Morrison, perhaps trying to defuse the tension, spoke up with academic enthusiasm. "Actually, human military doctrine emphasizes adaptability and innovation over raw physical power. Our success in warfare comes from our ability to think creatively and work as coordinated units." "Coordination?" Korthak's eyes glittered with amusement. "You mean hiding behind your companions when faced with a superior opponent? How very practical." He leaned down, bringing his scarred face closer to the humans. "In my culture, warriors prove their worth through individual combat. Perhaps your Marine would like to demonstrate these famous human tactics?" Rodriguez felt every eye in the common area turned toward him. The challenge was unmistakable, delivered in front of representatives from dozens of species. How he responded would set the tone for humanity's entire relationship with the galactic community. He could feel Admiral Chen's tension beside him, knew she was calculating the political ramifications of any response. The Marine stood slowly, his movement deliberate and controlled. At 6 feet 4 inches and 240 pounds of muscle hardened by years of combat training, Rodriguez was large for a human. But, standing before Korthak, he looked almost small. The Zephyrian warrior's natural armor plating gleamed under the artificial lighting, and his 4 arms were thick with corded muscle that could probably crush a human skull without effort. "I appreciate the offer," Rodriguez said quietly, his voice carrying the calm authority of a man accustomed to command. "But I'm here to protect our delegation, not to provide entertainment." Korthak's mandibles clicked again, louder this time. Several other Zephyrians had gathered nearby, drawn by the scent of potential violence. "Protection?" The alien warrior's voice rose, carrying easily across the now silent common area. "For what threat could you possibly protect them? You are soft meat pretending to be a predator." The insult was calculated and deliberate. In galactic military culture, questioning a warrior's ability to protect his charges was one of the gravest provocations possible. Rodriguez felt the familiar ice-cold clarity that always preceded action, the mental state his instructors had called combat ready. Time seemed to slow as his body automatically shifted into a fighting stance. But Admiral Chen's hand on his arm held him back. Her touch was gentle but urgent, a reminder of the bigger picture. Starting a fight here would doom humanity's chances of joining the galactic community. Everything they had worked for would collapse because of one moment's loss of control. Rodriguez nodded slowly and stepped back, his hands remaining loose at his sides. "Like I said, I'm just here to do my job." The disappointment in Korthak's eyes was replaced by something far worse, contempt. The Zephyrian straightened to his full height, looking down at the human with obvious disgust. I see. Earth's warriors are not just weak, they are cowards as well. The words hit Rodriguez like physical blows. In 20 years of military service, no one had ever successfully questioned his courage. He had charged machine gun nests in Kashmir, held impossible positions against overwhelming odds, and earned the respect of every man and woman who had served beside him. The accusation of cowardice was not just an insult. It was a fundamental denial of everything he had dedicated his life to. But still, he held his position. The mission came first. Always. Korthak seemed to sense the human's internal struggle and pressed his advantage. Perhaps your species simply lacks the genetic capacity for true courage. You hide behind your technology and your numbers because individually you are nothing. Weak, fragile, worthless. The alien warrior reached out with one massive hand and casually pushed Rodriguez's shoulder. The gesture was deliberately dismissive, the kind of casual disrespect that would normally trigger immediate retaliation. But Rodriguez absorbed the push without response, his face remaining stoically neutral. Yes, Korthak continued, his voice growing louder. This is what I expected from Earth's so-called warriors. All reputation and no substance. Your species will serve as excellent manual laborers once the Council determines your proper place in galactic society. Admiral Chun stepped forward, her own diplomatic training straining under the pressure. I think this conversation has gone far enough. Korthak's second push was harder, rocking Rodriguez back on his heels. The alien's eyes blazed with predatory excitement as he sensed weakness. Stay silent, female. I am testing your protector's worthiness. The third push was delivered with enough force to knock a normal human to the ground. Rodriguez caught himself, muscles bunching as his body prepared to respond. Every instinct screamed for action, but he forced himself to remain still. The mission, the delegation, humanity's future. That was when Korthak made his fatal mistake. Instead of being satisfied with the human's apparent submission, the Zephyrian warrior decided to deliver one final humiliation. His massive hand swept up in a backhanded slap aimed at Rodriguez's face, not intended to cause serious damage, but to mark the human as his inferior in front of the assembled aliens. The blow never landed. Rodriguez's response was so fast that most observers didn't see the movement, only the result. His left hand snapped up to catch Korthak's wrist, stopping the slap inches from his face. For a moment, the two warriors stood frozen in tableau, the human's grip locked around the alien's armored limb. Korthak's eyes widened in surprise. The grip was impossibly strong, far beyond what any human should have been capable of. He tried to pull free and found that he couldn't. Rodriguez's fingers were locked around his wrist like steel bands. That's enough, Rodriguez said quietly, his voice carrying a new edge that made several nearby aliens step back involuntarily. I've been patient because I understand the politics involved here. But if you put your hands on me again, we're going to have a problem. Korthak's other three arms moved simultaneously, reaching for the human with the speed of a striking serpent. He was a veteran of 100 battles, trained in the most sophisticated combat techniques known to galactic civilization. No primitive human could possibly match his reflexes or skill. He was catastrophically wrong. Rodriguez's right fist moved in a compact arc that terminated against Korthak's temple with the sound of cracking stone. The punch was delivered with perfect technique, hip rotation, shoulder engagement, and the full weight of the human's body behind the blow. But more than technique, it carried 20 years of combat experience and the accumulated fury of watching his species treated like animals. The impact shattered Korthak's natural armor, plating like glass. The alien warrior staggered, his amber eyes going wide with shock and pain. Dark fluid leaked from the crack that now ran across the side of his skull. In 3 centuries of combat, no opponent had ever managed to damage his natural defenses so easily. Rodriguez released the alien's wrist and stepped back, his stance shifting into the relaxed readiness of a professional fighter. "Last warning," he said calmly. Korthak's response was pure instinct. His species' combat doctrine emphasized overwhelming physical assault, used superior size, strength, and natural weapons to crush opponents before they could react. All four of his arms swept toward the human in a coordinated attack pattern that had never failed him before. Rodriguez slipped the first two strikes with minimal movement, his head weaving just enough to let the massive fists pass harmlessly by. The third arm he caught at the elbow, using Korthak's own momentum to twist the limb into an impossible angle. The snap of breaking bone echoed through the now silent common area. The fourth punch he simply stepped into, accepting the blow against his left shoulder while driving his own right fist directly into the center of Korthak's chest. The alien's natural armor, already compromised by the first strike, cracked further under the assault. Korthak doubled over, struggling to breathe as his respiratory system went into shock. "Stay down," Rodriguez advised, flexing his bruised left shoulder experimentally. "This doesn't have to get worse." But Korthak was beyond rational thought. The pain and humiliation of being bested by what he considered an inferior species had triggered a berserker rage that overrode all tactical thinking. With a roar that shattered several nearby drinking vessels, he launched himself at the human in one final, desperate assault. Rodriguez sidestepped the charge and brought his right fist up in a devastating uppercut that caught Korthak directly under the chin. The blow lifted the 8-foot alien completely off his feet, sending him crashing backward into a nearby table. Korthak struggled to rise, his movements uncoordinated and sluggish. Blood now flowed freely from multiple cracks in his armor plating, and his amber eyes had difficulty focusing. But still, he tried to continue the fight. Rodriguez's second punch landed just above the alien's left eye, opening another massive crack in the natural armor. The impact sent Korthak stumbling sideways into a support pillar. The third and final blow was delivered with surgical precision to the exact center of Korthak's forehead. The crack that resulted ran from the alien's brow ridge to the crown of his skull like a lightning bolt. Korthak the Render, veteran of 1,000 battles and killer of 300 sentient beings, collapsed to the deck like a felled tree. His massive body convulsed once, then lay still. The common area had fallen completely silent. Representatives from dozens of species stared at the fallen Zephyrian warrior and the human who had defeated him in what appeared to be single combat. Many of them were rapidly reassessing their initial impressions of Earth's military capabilities. Rodriguez stood over his fallen opponent, breathing hard but otherwise unmarked except for the bruise on his left shoulder. He looked down at Korthak's still form with something that might have been regret. "Someone should call medical," he said quietly, "and probably security." Admiral Chun moved to his side, her face a mask of diplomatic calm despite the chaos that had just erupted around their mission. She knew that everything had changed in the space of 30 seconds. Humanity was no longer the weak newcomer pleading for acceptance. They were now a demonstrated threat to the galactic order. The political ramifications would be enormous. But as she watched the other alien species giving Rodriguez a much wider berth than they had before, Chen found herself feeling a fierce satisfaction. Respect, she realized, was something that had to be earned. And her Marine had just earned it for all of humanity. The medical bay aboard the Celestial Dawn buzzed with controlled chaos as alien physicians worked to stabilize Korthak's condition. The Zephyrian warrior lay unconscious on a specialized treatment table, his massive frame connected to dozens of monitoring devices that painted a grim picture of his injuries. The 3 precise blows delivered by Rodriguez had caused extensive internal damage that went far beyond the visible cracks in his natural armor. Dr. Zilthak, the ship's chief medical officer and a member of the crystalline prism species, examined the readouts with growing fascination. His translucent body pulsed with soft blue light as he processed the medical data through his specialized neural networks. In over 2 centuries of treating combat injuries, He had never seen trauma patterns quite like these. Remarkable, he murmured to his assistant, a young Aquarian whose tentacled form allowed her to operate multiple medical instruments simultaneously. The human struck with surgical precision. Each blow targeted a specific structural weakness in Zephyrian physiology. The assistant's tentacles writhed nervously as she adjusted the life support equipment. But, Doctor, how could a primitive human know such things? Our medical databases indicate that Earth has had no previous contact with Zephyrian anatomy. Dr. Zilthak's crystalline structure flickered as he considered the question. Perhaps their knowledge was instinctive rather than learned. Many predator species develop an intuitive understanding of where to strike for maximum effect. He paused, studying the scans more carefully. Though the precision suggests something more sophisticated than mere instinct. In the adjacent waiting area, representatives from the Zephyrian delegation demanded answers. Commander Thrax, Korthak's second-in-command, paced the small space like a caged predator. His scarred face bore the ritual markings of a proven killer, though his battle count was considerably lower than his fallen leaders. The sight of Korthak, the invincible render, lying broken and unconscious had shaken the entire Zephyrian contingent to their core. This is an act of unprovoked aggression, Thrax snarled, his mandibles clicking with barely controlled rage. The human attacked Korthak without warning or justification. This violation of galactic law demands immediate retribution. Captain Vextar, the ship's commanding officer and a veteran Centaurian diplomat, tried to maintain order despite the escalating tensions. His four arms gestured placatingly as he spoke, each movement calculated to project calm authority. Commander Thrax, I understand your concern, but we must wait for the full investigation before drawing conclusions. Investigation? Thrax's voice rose to a roar that echoed through the medical bay. I witnessed the attack personally. The human used some form of concealed weapon or enhancement. No natural creature could have damaged Korthak so severely with bare hands. The accusation was serious. Galactic law strictly prohibited the use of hidden weapons or unauthorized biological modifications during diplomatic missions. If Rodriguez had indeed used some form of enhancement, it would justify immediate military action against the human delegation. Meanwhile, in their assigned quarters, the human team was dealing with their own crisis. Admiral Chun had called an emergency meeting to assess the situation, but the small cabin felt cramped and stifling with all four humans present. The weight of potential disaster hung over them like a physical presence. Dr. Vasquez sat on the edge of her bunk, her face pale with stress. Sarah, we have to face reality. This incident has destroyed any chance of peaceful integration with the galactic community. They'll see us as violent primitives who can't be trusted. Rodriguez stood near the small porthole, staring out at the stars rushing past. His right hand was slightly swollen from the impacts, but otherwise he showed no signs of the brief but devastating encounter. I had to act, he said quietly. He was escalating toward actual violence. I've seen it too many times before. The pattern was unmistakable. Dr. Morrison, still processing what he had witnessed, shook his head in amazement. Marcus, I've studied Zephyrian physiology extensively. Their natural armor should have been impervious to human-level striking force. How did you know exactly where to hit? The Marine turned from the porthole, his expression thoughtful. Instinct, I guess. Every opponent has weak points. You just have to know how to look for them. The way his armor plating overlapped, the spacing of his segments, the obvious stress points around joints and transition areas. He flexed his bruised knuckles experimentally. Plus, armor that heavy has to have flex points, or the wearer couldn't move effectively. Admiral Chin studied her security chief with new eyes. Rodriguez's service record was impressive, but she was beginning to understand that the man's tactical intelligence went far beyond what was documented in official reports. Marcus, I need you to think carefully about this. Is there any chance they could claim you used some kind of enhancement or hidden weapon? No enhancement, Rodriguez replied firmly. Just 20 years of learning how to hurt people efficiently. He looked directly at Chun, his expression serious. "Admiral, I know what this means for the mission, but I won't apologize for defending myself and our delegation." The conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from the cabin's communication panel. Captain Vextar's image appeared on the small screen, his expression diplomatically neutral despite the obvious tension in his posture. "Admiral Chun, I must request that Sergeant Rodriguez submit to immediate medical examination. The Zephyrian delegation has formally accused him of using unauthorized enhancements, and Galactic Protocol requires verification of all participants' biological status." Chin nodded, having expected this development. "Of course, Captain. We'll cooperate fully with any investigation." Additionally, Vextar continued, "The Galactic Council has been notified of this incident. A full tribunal ship is being dispatched to Harmony Point. You should arrive approximately 6 hours before they do." The communication ended, leaving the humans to contemplate their uncertain future. Rodriguez gathered his few personal belongings, preparing to submit to whatever tests the alien medical staff deemed necessary. As he moved toward the door, Dr. Morrison stopped him with a gentle hand on his arm. "Marcus, there's something else I need to tell you. The way you defeated Korthak, it's going to change how every species in the galaxy views humanity. The Zephyrians have been the dominant military force for over 2 centuries. No one has ever beaten one of their warriors in single combat." Rodriguez paused, considering the implications. "So what does that make us now?" "Unknown," Morrison replied. "And in galactic politics, unknown is often more dangerous than weak." The medical examination took place in the ship's primary diagnostic bay, witnessed by representatives from multiple species to ensure transparency. Dr. Zilthak supervised the process personally, using the most sophisticated scanning equipment available to galactic medicine. Rodriguez submitted to the examination with stoic patience, allowing the various alien instruments to probe and analyze every aspect of his physiology. The scans revealed dense bone structure, unusually developed muscle fiber, and a cardiovascular system optimized for sustained physical stress, all within normal parameters for a human military specialist. "No artificial enhancements detected," Dr. Zilthak announced to the assembled witnesses. "No cybernetic implants, no genetic modifications, no pharmacological augmentations. This human appears to be operating within the normal range of his species' capabilities." Commander Thrax struggled to accept the results. "Then, how do you explain his ability to damage Korthak? The Render has survived direct hits from plasma weapons that could vaporize a lesser being." Dr. Zilthak's crystalline structure pulsed thoughtfully as he reviewed the data. "Perhaps we have underestimated human striking power. Their skeletal structure appears optimized for delivering focused kinetic energy, and their muscular development suggests capability for generating significant force. But the precision," Thrax insisted. "How did he know exactly where to strike for maximum damage?" Before Dr. Zilthak could respond, a new voice entered the conversation. Perhaps because humans are natural predators. Everyone turned to see Commander Sethes of the Draconian Hegemony enter the medical bay. The reptilian being's scales gleamed under the artificial lighting, and his yellow eyes held the calculating intelligence of a born hunter. Unlike many species in the galactic community, Draconians had earned their position through conquest rather than diplomacy. "Commander Sethes," Captain Vextar acknowledged warily. "Your presence here is unexpected." Sethes's forked tongue flicked out briefly, tasting the emotional tension in the air. "I came to observe these humans personally. My species has particular interest in potential apex predators." His gaze fixed on Rodriguez with unmistakable approval. This one fought well. The comment sent ripples of unease through the assembled aliens. The Draconian Hegemony was barely contained within galactic law, and their approval of human combat capabilities could signal dangerous developments. "The human defeated Korthak through superior tactical thinking," Sethes continued, circling Rodriguez like a predator studying potential prey. "He identified structural weaknesses, exploited them with minimal effort, and ended the threat efficiently. Classic predator behavior. Commander Thrax's mandibles clicked angrily. Are you suggesting that humans represent some kind of military threat to the established order? Sethys' laugh was a hissing sound that made several nearby beings step back nervously. I am suggesting that your people have grown complacent. You assume your natural advantages make you invincible, but this human proved that assumption wrong. The tension in the medical bay was reaching dangerous levels when Dr. Vasquez arrived with a small security escort. The diplomat's presence immediately shifted the dynamic, reminding everyone that political considerations still took precedence over military posturing. "Gentlemen," she said calmly, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to managing difficult situations. "I believe we're all getting ahead of ourselves." Sergeant Rodriguez acted in self-defense after being physically assaulted. Under galactic law, he had every right to protect himself. Thrax turned his anger toward the human diplomat. "Your warrior used excessive force." Korthak offered no lethal threat. "With respect, Commander," Vasquez replied, "your warrior outweighed Sergeant Rodriguez by at least 100 pounds, possessed natural armor that should have made him invulnerable to human attack, and had 4 arms to my sergeant's 2. Under those circumstances, any level of force necessary to ensure survival would be considered reasonable." The argument continued as Rodriguez underwent additional testing, but the results remained consistent. Every scan confirmed that he was an unmodified human operating within normal parameters for his species. The implications of this finding began to sink in among the alien observers. If an average human soldier could defeat a Zephyrian warrior in single combat, what did that suggest about humanity's overall military potential? How many Rodriguez-level fighters could Earth field if necessary? And, more troubling, what would happen if humans decided to expand their territory through conquest rather than diplomacy? Commander Sethys seemed particularly interested in these questions. As the formal examination concluded, he approached Rodriguez with obvious approval. "Human warrior, your species intrigues me. The Draconian hegemony would be interested in establishing closer military ties with Earth." Admiral Chun, who had been observing quietly, stepped forward before Rodriguez could respond. "Commander Sethys, any such discussions would need to go through proper diplomatic channels after our mission concludes. But the damage was already done." The suggestion of a human draconian military alliance sent shock waves through the other species representatives. The Draconians were barely restrained warmongers who had been looking for an excuse to challenge the galactic order for decades. If they gained access to human military capabilities, the balance of power could shift dramatically. News of the incident and the medical examination results spread quickly through the ship's communication networks. By the time the Celestial Dawn approached Harmony Point, representatives from every major galactic power had been briefed on the situation. What had begun as a simple diplomatic mission was rapidly escalating into a major political crisis. The space station loomed ahead, a massive construction of metal and crystal that served as neutral ground for interspecies negotiations. Harmony Point was designed to accommodate every known form of sentient life, from the aquatic aquarians to the energy-based photonics. Its mere existence represented the pinnacle of galactic cooperation and peaceful coexistence. But as the transport ship docked with the station, everyone aboard understood that they were not arriving as planned. The human delegation was no longer a group of hopeful petitioners seeking membership in galactic society. They had become the center of a controversy that could reshape the political landscape of known space. In his quarters, Rodriguez prepared for whatever would come next. He understood that his actions had consequences far beyond the simple defense of his dignity. Every species in the galaxy would now be reassessing their position regarding humanity, and many of those reassessments would not be favorable. But as he looked out at the sprawling space station, the Marine felt no regret. He had done his job, protected his delegation, and upheld human dignity in the face of alien contempt. If that made humanity a threat in the eyes of the galactic community, then perhaps it was time for the galactic community to learn that humans were not the weak, compliant species they had assumed. The real test was only just beginning. The Grand Assembly Chamber of Harmony Point had witnessed countless diplomatic negotiations over the centuries, but never had it hosted a tribunal quite like this one. The massive circular chamber stretched nearly a kilometer in diameter, its transparent aluminum walls offering a breathtaking view of the nebula that served as the station's backdrop. Hundreds of seats arranged in concentric circles accommodated representatives from every major galactic civilization, each delegation positioned according to complex protocols that reflected their species' military and economic power. At the center of the chamber stood a raised platform where the accused and their accusers would present their cases. Admiral Chun, Dr. Vasquez, and Rodriguez occupied one section while the Zephyrian delegation faced them from across the platform. The tension between the two groups was palpable, crackling through the air like electrical discharge. High above them all, the Tribunal Council occupied their elevated positions. 5 beings from different species, each chosen for their reputation for wisdom and impartiality, would determine humanity's fate. Their decision would either welcome Earth into the galactic community or brand them as a dangerous element to be contained or eliminated. The primary arbiter, an ancient being known only as the Eternal, spoke in a voice that seemed to resonate from everywhere at once. Its species had evolved beyond physical form eons ago, existing now as pure consciousness within a crystalline matrix. We gather to address accusations of excessive violence and potential treaty violations. Let the formal charges be presented. Commander Thrax rose from his position, his scarred features twisted with barely contained rage. In the days since Korthak's defeat, his warrior's condition had stabilized, but the psychological impact on the entire Zephyrian delegation had been devastating. Their reputation for invincibility, built over centuries of military dominance, had been shattered by a single human's fists. Honored arbiters, Thrax began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber through the universal translation system. The human military specimen designated Rodriguez committed an act of unprovoked aggression against our delegation leader. Using concealed techniques and possibly forbidden enhancements, he inflicted severe injuries that would have been fatal to most species. The accusation sent murmurs through the assembled delegates. Several species that had been considering alliances with humanity began reassessing their positions. The suggestion that humans might possess hidden military capabilities was deeply troubling to civilizations that prided themselves on technological and tactical superiority. Thrax continued his presentation, displaying holographic recreations of the fight that emphasized Rodriguez's speed and precision. The images were manipulated to make the humans' movements appear almost supernatural, suggesting abilities far beyond normal biological parameters. This attack demonstrates that humans are not the peaceful species they claim to be. They are deceptive predators who conceal their true nature until the moment to strike. Dr. Vasquez stood to respond, her diplomatic training helping her maintain composure despite the character assassination taking place. Honored arbiters, the evidence clearly shows that Sergeant Rodriguez acted purely in self-defense. The Zephyrian warrior initiated physical contact and escalated the situation despite repeated attempts at de-escalation. She activated her own holographic display, showing the same events from multiple angles. Her version emphasized Korthak's aggressive behavior and the deliberate nature of his provocations. Furthermore, extensive medical examination has confirmed that Sergeant Rodriguez used no enhancements or concealed weapons. His victory was achieved through skill, training, and tactical superiority. The presentation of evidence continued for hours, with both sides calling witnesses and experts to support their positions. Species after species offered their perspectives on human nature, most colored by their own biases and political considerations. The Aquarians, a peaceful species that abhorred violence, expressed deep concern about humanity's aggressive tendencies. The mechanoids, who valued efficiency above all else, were impressed by Rodriguez's tactical effectiveness. But it was Commander Sethes of the Draconian hegemony whose testimony proved most significant. The reptilian warrior took the platform with the confident swagger of a proven predator, his yellow eyes gleaming with predatory satisfaction. "Honored arbiters," Sethes began, his forked tongue tasting the air, "I have observed this human warrior personally, and I believe the assembled delegates are asking the wrong questions. The issue is not whether this Rodriguez used forbidden enhancements. Clearly he did not. The question is whether humanity as a species represents a military threat to the established galactic order." His words sent shock waves through the chamber. Several delegates began urgent conversations with their advisors, while others demanded immediate clarification. Sethes smiled, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. "My species has studied human military history extensively since first contact. These beings have spent their entire evolutionary development engaged in constant warfare with themselves. Their tactical innovations, their weapons development, their understanding of violence, all of it far exceeds their apparent technological level." He gestured toward Rodriguez, who stood silently at attention despite the scrutiny. This warrior defeated Korthak not through superior strength or speed, but through superior understanding of combat dynamics. He read his opponent's movements, identified structural vulnerabilities, and exploited them with minimal effort. This is not the behavior of a primitive species. It is the hallmark of evolved predators. The Draconian commander's testimony was devastating to humanity's case. By framing Rodriguez's victory as evidence of human military sophistication rather than individual skill, he transformed the incident from a simple self-defense situation into a potential threat assessment. The Eternal's voice filled the chamber once again. The accused will now present their final statement. Admiral Chun had been preparing for this moment since the tribunal began. She understood that humanity's entire future depended on the next few minutes, and every word would be analyzed by civilizations capable of erasing Earth from existence. "Honored arbiters," she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded fleets in Earth's bloodiest conflicts, "we stand accused of deception and excessive violence. But I ask you to consider what actually happened aboard the transport ship." She activated a new holographic display that showed the incident from beginning to end, but this time with enhanced analysis that revealed details missed in previous presentations. Sergeant Rodriguez endured multiple physical assaults without retaliation. He de-escalated repeatedly, attempting to avoid confrontation despite clear provocation. Only when faced with escalating violence did he respond with the minimum force necessary to neutralize the threat. The enhanced display showed Korthak's movements with new clarity, revealing the calculated nature of his aggression. Each push, each insult, each escalation was clearly part of a deliberate strategy to provoke a response. "But, more importantly," Chin continued, "I want you to understand what Sergeant Rodriguez represents. He is not an enhanced super soldier or a genetic aberration. He is a standard human military professional, trained according to doctrines developed over centuries of conflict on our world." She paused, allowing that information to sink in. Several delegates were beginning to look deeply concerned as they processed the implications. "You speak of humanity as a military threat, but you misunderstand our nature. We do not fight because we enjoy violence. We fight because we refuse to submit to it. Every human culture has developed defensive traditions because survival on our world requires the ability to protect what matters to you." Chin's voice grew stronger as she approached her conclusion. Sergeant Rodriguez could have killed Korthak easily. His training and experience gave him dozens of opportunities to deliver lethal strikes. Instead, he chose the exact level of force necessary to end the threat without permanent damage. This is not the behavior of a mindless aggressor. It is the action of a disciplined professional who understands the difference between victory and destruction. The chamber fell silent as delegates processed this perspective. The idea that Rodriguez had deliberately restrained himself was almost more troubling than the suggestion that he had used excessive force. It implied a level of tactical sophistication that went far beyond what most species attributed to humans. Rodriguez himself finally spoke, his voice calm and measured despite the thousands of alien beings hanging on his every word. Honored arbiters, I've been called a lot of things in my career. Soldier, Marine, Protector, Warrior. But I've never been called a murderer, and I won't accept that label now. He looked directly at Commander Thrax, his gaze steady and unflinching. Your warrior pushed me 3 times before I responded. In my culture, that represents extraordinary patience. When I finally acted, it was with the exact amount of force necessary to neutralize a threat to my delegation. Rodriguez paused, his expression growing more serious. You want to know what makes humans dangerous? It's not our strength or our speed or our weapons. It's our willingness to stand up to bullies, regardless of the odds. Korthak thought he could intimidate us because we're smaller and softer than his species. He learned that size isn't the only factor that matters in a fight. The Marine's final statement was simple but profound. We came here seeking friendship and cooperation. We still want those things, but we will not accept them at the cost of our dignity or our safety. The Eternal conferred with the other arbiters for what felt like hours while the assembled delegates waited in tense silence. Finally, the ancient being's voice filled the chamber once more. The tribunal has reached its decision. The charges against the human delegate Rodriguez are dismissed. His actions constituted legitimate self-defense under galactic law. Relief flooded through the human delegation, but the Eternal was not finished. However, this incident has raised significant concerns about humanity's integration into galactic society. The demonstrated combat capabilities of a single human warrior have implications that extend far beyond this tribunal. The ancient being paused, and, when it continued, its words would reshape the galaxy's political landscape forever. Therefore, the tribunal offers humanity 2 choices. First, they may accept provisional membership in the Galactic Council with the understanding that their military capabilities will be closely monitored and regulated. Earth's armed forces would be limited to defensive roles, and human colonies would be restricted to systems deemed appropriate by the Council. Admiral Chun felt her heart sink. The offer was barely better than subjugation, designed to contain humanity rather than welcome them as equals. Alternatively, the Eternal continued. Humanity may choose to remain outside the traditional galactic community while accepting recognition as a sovereign power. This path would grant them complete autonomy over their affairs, but would also mean foregoing the protections and benefits of council membership. The choice was stark and immediate. Accept subordination or choose independence with all its risks and uncertainties. Before Admiral Chun could respond, Commander Sethes rose from his position in the Draconian section. Honored arbiters, the hegemony wishes to make a formal announcement. The Eternal's attention shifted to the reptilian commander. Proceed. Sethes' smile was predatory and triumphant. The Draconian hegemony hereby offers humanity full partnership in a military alliance. We propose mutual defense agreements, technology sharing, and joint military operations against any who would threaten either of our peoples. The offer sent shock waves through the chamber. A human-draconian alliance would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy, creating a military bloc that could challenge the Council's authority. Other delegates began rising to offer their own proposals. The peaceful Aquarians offered sanctuary worlds where humans could settle without military restrictions. The technologically advanced mechanoids suggested research partnerships that would accelerate human development. Even some of the minor powers began making overtures, seeking to align themselves with what they now recognized as a potential major force. Admiral Chun realized that humanity had achieved something unprecedented. In the space of a few days, they had gone from supplicants seeking membership to a power being courted by every major civilization in the galaxy. She looked at Rodriguez, who stood quietly beside her, apparently unaware that his 3 punches had reshaped galactic politics forever. The Marine had done exactly what he always did, protected his team and completed his mission. But in doing so, he had proven that humans would not be intimidated, contained, or dismissed. Honored arbiters, Chun said finally, humanity chooses independence. We will not accept restrictions on our sovereignty or limitations on our right to defend ourselves. If the galaxy wants our friendship, they can earn it through mutual respect rather than forced submission. The decision was met with a mixture of approval and concern from the assembled delegates. Some species saw it as the natural choice of a proud warrior race, while others worried about the implications of an uncontained human military expansion. As the formal session concluded and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Rodriguez found himself surrounded by alien military officers seeking to understand how he had achieved the impossible. His explanation was characteristically modest: good training, tactical awareness, and the willingness to act when necessary. But as word spread throughout the galaxy about the human who had defeated a Zephyrian warrior with 3 precise punches, a new reality began to take shape. Humanity was no longer the weak newcomer seeking acceptance. They were a force to be reckoned with, respected, and perhaps feared. The galaxy had gained a new major power, and everyone understood that the old certainties no longer applied. The age of human expansion had begun, and it would be marked not by submission or compromise, but by the simple principle that had guided Rodriguez throughout the crisis. Respect had to be earned, and, if necessary, it would be taken.